Our moderator for this panel is going to be Robert Hacker from Fortune magazine. Robert Hackett, excuse me.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. I'm Robert Hackett, I'm a reporter at Fortune. I cover cybersecurity there. Our panel today is on Yahoo and breaches, and I'm sure we'll touch on a bunch of other subjects as well. I'll reserve some time at the end for questions, so if you've got anything you're thinking about, mull them over in the meantime. But right now, I'd love to have my panelists introduce themselves. We can go right down the line. We'll start with you.
I'm John Shegerian. I'm the chairman and co-founder of Electronic Recyclers International, known as ERI Direct. We're the world's largest electronic recycling and hardware destruction firm, and we're located in New York and California, and we cover every zip code in the United States and have 8 facilities across the United States.
Hi, my name is Shira Rubinoff. I'm president of a company called SecureMySocial. We're technology-assisted self-monitoring for employers to give employees to self-monitor across social media based on compliance and regulations of the organization with real-time warnings and auto-delete capabilities. And I also recently became a partner in a new started incubator in New York City called Bridge 17 Partners, and we will be launching in September.
I'm the founder and tolerated CEO at a company called PhishMe. We're in the business of helping organizations defend against phishing attacks, arguably the #1 attack vector behind every major breach you hear about these days. We focus on the human element of security, from making it more resilient to also turning humans into sensors of such attacks, informants, and leveraging gray matter and real intelligence more than artificial intelligence to actually fight the threat.
Okay, thanks everybody. So first I want to ask if anybody here knows whether their account credentials were compromised in the Yahoo breach. We got one hand in the back, just one, 2. Okay, have your account credentials been compromised in any breach that you know of? You can check, there's a database called Have I Been Owned, which is pretty useful. I know mine were compromised in the Tumblr breach, so I'm sure some of yours were as well. But anyway, I'd like to ask all of you, what lessons did you learn from the Yahoo breach? It was a long ordeal, an extended, drawn-out thing as they were being bought by Verizon. What did you learn from that? We can start with you, Rohyt.
Sure. I think in the last few years, there have been a few breaches which have elevated cybersecurity from a geek, torn jeans guy issue to a board-level issue. Yahoo is one of those cases when you see real enterprise value eroded because of a breach. Everyone pays attention. I think what we've also learned via Yahoo and a lot of the recent breaches is that we really suck at root cause analysis in cybersecurity. I was reading all the news stories about WannaCry, and everyone's talking about the SMB vulnerability. My question is, how did the bad guys get in? The spread was via SMB once they broke into your organization. How did they get in? And people aren't really doing the root cause analysis enough. So unfortunately, those are lessons we're learning the hard way in cybersecurity. Yahoo was a similar situation. I think breach preparedness was clearly suboptimal there, and focus on the human element was lacking or marginally existent, if that.
I think one of the other things you can learn is not to reuse passwords. I think people reuse their passwords across multiple sites to gain entree into numerous platforms which they use, whether it being banks, sites, and the like. And they're using challenge questions as dual factor authentication, which is a real problem since most of the challenge questions, they'll be mother's maiden name, or your favorite color, or your first dog. You can't reset a password and change that. Your mother's maiden name will stay the maiden name, and that's pretty much used everywhere. So utilizing that as a dual factor is a very weak term for a security. And when Yahoo came out and it said, change your passwords, because if you use them across multiple sites, because we've been hacked, people had major problems because they utilized it in banks, they utilized it anywhere they're really doing things. So they really had to beef up on that.
Yahoo, like many other large corporations, both publicly traded and privately held, when I first spoke to Yahoo executives now 9 or 10 years ago and said, you need our services to recycle your old hardware responsibly, they looked at me like I was an alien from a different planet. But after engaging in that kind of public flogging and breach that they went under, typically companies like Yahoo will then call us back and said, we want to reconsider our discussions and relook at everything we're doing, because breaches, as one of my colleagues just said here, the root cause analysis is not only not being done, it's being, when it's not known, it's just being attributed to phishing or software, or of course the evil empires of China, North Korea, or Russia. The truth is, the evil that's being done sometimes is just being done in a non-nefarious way from within. The misappropriation of the hard assets of a government entity or a company like Yahoo can cause as much harm as a software breach. And the world is, of course, focused on all these wonderful unicorn companies such as Palantir, CyberArk, and all these other companies that are doing this great software work. But if the hardware is being misappropriated, they're leaving themselves as open to if they have never spent a dime on any software whatsoever.
So what advice would you have for a company like Yahoo in order to improve their defenses, to improve their security, to make sure another kind of breach like this doesn't happen?
Well, I think, you know, on prior panels, there was some very smart people who talked about defense in depth, and it's a very, it's often used very cheaply, but hard to implement. So that's something that should be thought about. Examining the threat landscape as it applies to your organization, looking at the various potential attack vectors that can come to fruition, and having a defense in depth strategy that says we're not relying on any single silver bullet here. There just isn't any silver bullet in cybersecurity. So, you know, it's really interesting. You walk by conferences and you look at booths of vendors, you know, the talk tracks all around, you know, you buy our shiny blinky box and your problems go away. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I've been in cybersecurity for 16 years and gainfully employed for the single reason that people believe in that. So that's not the case. I've been an incident responder in my career. I worked at a little company called Mandiant. I was employee number 4 there. We work out large checks for massive breaches. That continues happening. So I think the advice really is have your defense in depth for the preventative aspects, but also be prepared for the attack. It's coming. It's going to happen, and be prepared for an attack and or a breach. And when you kind of look at it holistically, you have to look at it people, process, technology across that board.
And I will add on to what Rohyt has said. I think you also have to look at the human weakness. That's a part that people tend to overlook. You know, you could develop technology upon technology, put a security upon security, and really build out the technology. At the end of the day, it boils down to social engineering. Somebody's trying to trick somebody to do something, to give up something so you could hack and get whatever you want to get. At the end of the day, you've got to make sure that your employees are protected, your customers are protected, the people that are sitting behind the machinery, the human factors of information security. The people are the important piece.
I was in Luxembourg last week speaking at a large information destruction conference with leaders from all across Europe. And what's coming in Europe is called the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations. And the penalties for going against that and not adhering to that, which is going to be rolled out next year, are massive. And one of the key items of the new GDPR in Europe, which I believe will splash back and affect us here in America, and something similar will be rolled out here pretty soon thereafter, is going to be at companies and at all types of organizational entities that have any touch to data. There's going to be now the requirement of a data protection officer for the first time ever. Someone who in that organization is going to be held accountable for all the data, whether it's software-based or hardware-based. There's going to be a data protection officer. And I believe the professionalization of the protection of government or corporations' data is the beginning of some of the lessons that we've figured out after the Yahoo breach.
Could I jump in one more thing?
Sure,
I think
go for
that we
it.
also have to think about people's personal computers. that not just the stuff that they're doing in the office or utilizing their work machines, but also their home machines. How are they being protected if they're VPNing in, if they're utilizing it for work situations? I think they have to look at the whole scope of it, as Rohyt was saying, and also John was saying that it's important to look at the whole scope and the magnitude of where people are coming from and what they're doing.
Right.
And that kind of plays into what SecureMySocial does, right?
Well, correct. You know, at the end of the day, we were talking about data, right? So data loss happens in many different areas, giving over information. Sometimes people aren't necessarily thinking that they're doing it. So SecureMySocial, what we do is it's called data loss protection for social media. Somebody puts out a tweet, a Facebook post, things like that, that not necessarily from work, could be from anywhere, and not necessarily thinking of what they're doing, but it gets out there. We give them the real-time warnings to stop them what they're doing and letting them know this at this moment can actually lead to problems at your workspace. So letting people know and educating, not just educating, but teaching stuff that Rohyt does also as well in terms of the whole phishing. You got to educate your employees, educate the people what they need to do, what they shouldn't be doing, how to stop the breaches before they happen, even from the inside by accident.
So hypothetically, if I were the president of the United States and I wake up at 6 a.m. Sometimes and I decide to tweet some stuff, how would your software work in that case?
Well, that's a very loaded question because his whole view, let's put it, is any type of publicity is good publicity. So he doesn't want to stop anything, right? That's a lot bigger part of the platform. But had he been using SecureMySocial and had one of the rule sets be, I won't even go there, but specific things that shouldn't be out there, he'd get the real-time warning, letting him know he did it. Or if so authorized, it could actually be auto-deleted before it goes out, and he'd get a message letting him know it was auto-deleted, but with his authorization now.
So John, electronics destruction, that isn't the first thing that comes to mind when you think of cybersecurity. Usually you're thinking of like these kind of like hot little like software products that are doing some fancy threat correlation or something. What does the destruction of electronics have to do with cybersecurity? Maybe you can piece it together for us.
Truth be known, when we started the company back in 2005, it was mostly about environmental protection. And we built then the world's largest electronic recycling machines, and they're all across the United States, from Boston to Fresno, California. But those machines now that literally turn people's data into dust. This is some examples here of different sizes of how we turn the hardware from data to dust, depending on what government entity or what corporation we're doing the work for, have become the world's largest hardware cybersecurity destruction machines. So there's actually the convergence of two huge trends of cybersecurity and data protection and data destruction with sustainability, doing it in an environmentally responsible way. And those two trends, as an entrepreneur, you have to take it where you get it. And those two trends have equaled a growing business and a growing company as we have it now.
These are pretty cool. Could we pass them around?
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
100%.
Does anybody
You can
care
keep
to
them after
see?
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Rohyt, so phishing tends to be the way that attackers get into businesses. How should a business go about protecting itself and making sure its employees don't fall victim to this attack vector?
Yeah, so I've been in cybersecurity for about 15 to 16 years. Unfortunately, this has been a perennial favorite since 2001 that I remember responding to attacks. Phishing, that is, whether it's nation-state actors, cyber criminals, hacktivists, it's really the low-hanging fruit for them. And unfortunately, I think one of the panelists, a couple of panels prior, said something really interesting. He said, the threat landscape is evolving very rapidly, and your defensive controls have to be able to rapidly evolve as well. The issue today is when you put a box in, I don't care how artificially intelligent it is, it's just not as smart as humans. Humans can evolve way faster, and attackers are way smarter than those AI boxes. So what's happening is, the technology being used at the perimeter or the endpoint is sort of behind the curve as far as the attacker's gray matter is concerned. Where PhishMe comes in, we say you do need those things. You do need the perimeter technologies. You do need the endpoint technology. But if we need to win this battle, you have an adaptive, human-oriented defensive control. You're going to fight human with human here. And essentially what we really focus on is saying, well, reducing susceptibility to phishing is one thing. You're never going to get to zero. There's always residual risk. But the way to minimize that risk is to have a critical mass of your employees who are conditioned to rapidly report suspicious activity that they see in email. So if they come in and rapidly report it, what you're going to be left with is a couple of infections, not data breaches, a couple of infections, which are easy and cheaper to clean up. And you get this rapid reporting. To give you an example, my VP of Finance, they attempted a wire fraud attack against our organization, PhishMe. The phishers love going after PhishMe, given our name, I guess. And the attack basically...
Practically taunting them.
Yeah. Well, we have a bullseye on our back. Well, the attacker started off the email, it's to Sam, it's like, hi, blah, 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 wire out this money, it hasn't gone through to this vendor, thanks, so on and so forth. It took Sam, who's our VP of Finance, and I guess he can't even really spell the word malware correctly, it took him about 7 seconds to identify this email as suspicious and actually call it out and it get operationalized. That's the key element, get operationalized. If you have knowledge and it's not operationalized, it's no good to me. Reducing click rate without the ability to leverage the folks that are really good at not falling is pointless in my opinion. Now what Sam was able to do in 7 seconds when he was asked by our IT team, why is it that you were able to find this email to be suspicious when the shebang of silver bullet boxes that we have on our own email servers didn't identify it? He said there were 3 indications in here. The email started with a hi. They were impersonating me to Sam asking for the wire, by the way. The email started with a hi. He said, Rohyt never says hi to me. Part 2 was he said, it asked me to wire money. Rohyt has never asked me to pay anyone. He only questions why I pay the lawyers so quick. Point number 3, at the bottom of the email, they tried to make it real authentic and it said, sent from my iPhone. Sam's of Korean origin, takes pride in the fact that I use a Samsung phone. So these are factors that technology just simply isn't there. I don't care how artificially smart it is to realize that this is a phish. But contextual awareness on Sam's part took him all of 7 seconds to look at this email, say, I'm going to call it suspicious. It went through now the technical controls that say, operationalize. Sam's reputation at identifying phish is really good. Let's go kill this email and any other emails that look like this on the email server.
When you get an email, is there a process that you personally go through to make sure it's not a phishing email? Is there like a checklist? You're like, okay, this is no typos, no weird domain name.
As I say, the brain's a muscle, right? So I think like with any other thing, muscle memory develops over time. I think when people are being conditioned originally, they have to be cognizant and be conscious. The goal here is to make it a subconscious activity of having an appropriate amount of skepticism. Not being cynical about email, but appropriate amount of skepticism. I really think what happens is, you eventually evolve to a point where you start identifying. I'll give another quick example, not to hog up the panel time here, but my co-founder was, his email was impersonated, sending an email to me, and the attackers did a really good job of looking at our press releases on our website and wrote up something that looked very appropriate. We had just launched a new product. My co-founder and the CTO says to me, apparently, that we have a major flaw in the product. We're going to have to roll it back from our beta customers, blah, blah, blah. That's what I wake up to at 6:30 one morning, my heart beating hard and adrenaline pumping. And I was about to open that PDF, which had the root cause analysis in it, actually, for the flaw. And I just realized at that point, I'm like, there's 2 things here. The email started saying, with Dear Rohyt. Aaron has never in his life called me dear. 1, and the email was about 2 pages long. He doesn't write emails that are more than 2 sentences long, that too with inappropriate grammar in them, right? So again, these are factors, you just build muscle memory over time, and you honestly just have to condition people to say, email is an attack vector, you are a target irrespective of who you are in the organization, and you just have to have the right amount of skepticism, and you get there subconsciously eventually.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on one more thing. I'll piggyback on Rohyt, what he's saying, that people are now moving in hyperspeed in the world. Everyone wants to get everything done yesterday. People are not stopping to pause. I think one of the things that Rohyt's technology is teaching, as well as my technology, is the stop and pause. It's not just hyperspeed, it's learning that you actually need to look at what you're doing, look at what's coming at you. Take that moment to actually see, is this real, is it wrong? With the SecureMySocial, it's the stop and pauses. Do you really want to send that thing? Is this right for me to be putting out there? So it's, again, the human factors, the element that's very critical in all the technology that's out there today.
I'm picturing what SecureMySocial would look like if I made it. It would probably be if you tweeted, it would just, a pop-up would come up and it would say never tweet. So how do you make it
It would be that guy with the
smarter than
hammer that
that?
like whacks you on the head and says, wake up.
How do you make it smarter? Like, what is a compromising piece of information that somebody shouldn't be tweeting out?
Well, for example, it depends on which organization you work for. So the way our technology works, there could be different rule sets for different groups within an organization. You want to get rid of all the false positives. You don't want to disrupt the way anyone's doing anything. They'd utilize their social media the way they always have. But if something falls within compliance with the organization that they shouldn't get out there, they'd get their real-time warning via SMS to known email address, wherever they want it. And it would let them know that they got it out there. And if they work for, pretty much in the banks, you sign away your life if you're higher enough up. So you could have auto-delete capabilities that will get rid of it, but let you know that you actually put it out there and warn you not to do it again and give you a link to reinstate if you want. Because, again, there's the whole privacy aspect of it. Privacy aspect of social media, you can't tell people what to do on their personal devices. But we are thinking about keeping people secure wherever they are, 24/7.
Okay, so I think we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to toss it to the audience in just a minute. I want to ask you, John, one last question, which is just how do you dispose of your own phones when you upgrade?
Typically, I give them back.
Sledgehammer?
Yeah, I give them back to my IT department, and they make sure they make their way into the shredder somehow. So.
Was that in the box you gave out? Was that your last phone?
Yeah, that was my last phone.
Okay, cool.
I get these things every once in a while. We have all kinds of security at the firm. And I got one a couple weeks ago, and it was somebody trying to load something into my computer in a branch of the firm. And because I picked it, like you said, just didn't seem right. And I called IT, and it took about an hour for somebody to get on my computer. So I wasted an hour of my time.
Right.
So I asked him, why can't we send them back a virus back down that same pike? And he said, Paul, we probably could, but we're not allowed. I said, well, can I have a friend of mine do it? He says, then you'd be fired. So why are companies, like I'm from Queens, so if there was a fight, I always strike first. Why don't all these companies, why doesn't somebody find a way to just strike back at these people?
Yeah, I think Retribution's a very challenging situation in cybersecurity. You have to realize it's an asymmetric battlefield. We're up against nation-state and attackers and highly organized, resourceful cybercriminal rings where I think the resources of both those sets of attackers far exceed that of any corporation typically. Yeah. So if you're going to hack back, which I think the last I know in the US is still illegal, but even if you try to do that through other channels, you better be ready for the retribution that comes post that retribution, which is going to be bad. So I think that's kind of the reason where hacking back is.
We can't find who sent it to us. We can't send it, so they can't find who sent it back.
I think you're opening yourself up for a challenge if you do with that. It's like, come and get me. They'll come get you.
Yeah,
You have to be careful of that.
I agree.
Anyone else have any pressing thoughts or questions? No? Okay.
Not a stupid question.
No question is stupid.
Thank you for saying that.
No problem.
Earlier, we were told that when patches come out, you should update your computer and put the patches in. I'm always paranoid. How do I know that that patch or notice that comes out isn't malware that I've been putting on my computer?
It's one of our most successful phishing simulation teams, by the way, is sending out an email that tells you to click on a link to apply a patch. You're right. It's highly. There's a chance that you're right. It could be you're right to be suspicious of those. The other challenge is, again, I'll just go to the patching point. Everyone's been talking about patching as it relates to the WannaCry issue. Most of the operating systems that were affected, including Windows XP, were end-of-lifed in 2013. That was 4 years ago. If you're using operating systems that are 4 years beyond end of life, you have bigger problems, I think. I think the other issue is in some situations it's hard because in the case of hospitals and others, they have purpose-built diagnostic systems that are offered by vendors that are running on XP. You have baggage claim systems at the airport that are running XP. You notice it every now and then. And applying patches to them will void the warranties on those purpose-built systems. So it's a real catch-22 for these IT security organizations to say, do I void the warranty by taking self-control, or do I wait for the vendor to apply the patch or create a patch and apply it, which sometimes never happens, as we found out. So that's where defense in depth really plays in, saying, okay, the patching is one piece to it. What else can I do to limit the damage? Can I segment my network to say, if this system were compromised, the attack wouldn't get beyond the infected system or a couple of systems? What other controls can I put around it?
I will also add that if you get a patch and a link, it's better not to click on the link. Go to the home page of where the patch came from and go right there and get it from the source. Clicking on links is not a good idea.
There were also a lot of pirated copies in countries that don't file copyright laws,
Correct.
like China or something. So with no security updates, they were pirated copies that added to the.
Yeah, the point being made here, just for everyone's benefit, is there's also software piracy that leads to the proliferation of this issue, because obviously you're not getting the patches. I think Microsoft specifically has done a better job now of trying to inventory and identify pirated software. But at the end of the day, you could still sort of stay below the radar if you were really motivated to, and it's a risk.
So I guess we'll just go once down the line with each of you, and if there's a point that we missed or didn't touch on that you want to make sure you kind of close off as a closing thought, we can do that.
I think cybersecurity has to be approached as a holistic opportunity and problem, depending on which side you're sitting on, both from a software and a hardware perspective, and we're happy to take care of the hardware side.
And I'll echo what I've said before, the human factors of information security and cybersecurity is a very big play and needs to be taken very seriously in the whole InfoSec space.
Yeah, I guess you guys, it's hard going last on this, but I'll just say, one of the things I've learned is that cybersecurity has evolved from what used to be this cute niche issue to it's a real problem. And it should be addressed that way. There's times where I still tell people what we do, and there's an initial chuckle. Oh, you simulate attacks to do this, huh? It's like, no, this is serious business, guys. Do you laugh when informants for the FBI are put through conditioning? No. They're put through simulated attacks in Quantico. Their hands and feet are tied at 3 a.m. and they're slapped and woken up with that. There's nothing funny about that. And that's what we do in cybersecurity is we have to condition people. There's nothing cute about it. We have to rely on highly technical, ethical talent here to get us there and not sensationalize the issue. So that's all I'll say.
Yeah, and follow those rules so you aren't the next Yahoo. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining.